The second round of dialogue between Colombia's government and the National Liberation Army begins in Mexico. In Turkey and Syria, the death toll climbed to 36,000 after 1 week of the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that hit the two countries. And the Russian intelligence services reported that the United States is actively recruiting insurgents linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda to attack Russian territory. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The second cycle of peace talks between the government of Colombia and the National Liberation Army started on Monday in Mexico. The talks will address issues such as the bilateral ceasefire and the incorporation of civil society in the construction of total peace. Both sides will also analyze the results of the first report of the humanitarian caravan, which will allow for the effective implementation of humanitarian relief for communities affected by the armed conflict. The new formal cycle of negotiations was created only 3 months after Colombia's President Gustavo Petro took office in August, and under his policy of total peace, the delegations held a first round of dialogues between November and December in Caracas. In a statement, Colombia's High Commissioner for Peace thanked the hospitality of Mexico, who serves as guarantor country together with Venezuela, Chile, Norway, and more recently Brazil, adding that Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, and Spain will assist the peace talks table as accompanying countries in this second cycle. And the Colombian airline Satena will have 2 new flight routes to Venezuela, according to an announcement made on Sunday by the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, on his Twitter account. The president indicated in his message that the airline will start its new operations to Venezuela as from March the 3rd, and that there will be other international destinations coming soon. The message details that Satena will fly Tuesdays and Fridays to Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, and tickets will be priced at $256. The state airline Satena, which belongs to the Colombian Air Force, joins Turkiye Airline in the exchange of passengers between Venezuela and Colombia after flights between both countries were reactivated. In Honduras, the President of the Congress, Luis Redondo, summoned the leaders of the different political factions in view of the failure of the negotiations to renew the members of the Supreme Court of Justice. The President of the Congress, Luis Redondo, issued a statement in which he summons the heads of the political factions to dialogue in order to reach an agreement. Last Saturday, the deputies concluded a debate without finalizing the election of the 15 members of the highest court of justice of the country for the period 2023-2030. In this context, the magistrate of the court, Edgardo Cáceres, announced that he will present his irrevocable resignation to the position after concluding his 7-year term. In Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso has been summoned to appear on Monday before the parliamentary committee investigating a corruption network in public companies, known as the Great Godfather. The multi-party committee will hold the ordinary session on Monday, and, in addition to the president, other officials were summoned, among them the ministers of the Interior, Juan Zapata, of Energy and Mines, Javier Vera Gruenwer, and of Defense, Luis Lara Jaramillo. The president of the Assembly's Occasional Committee, Viviana Veloz, stressed that the president is not obliged to attend. Even so, Veloz called on Lasso to attend as a moral obligation. The National Assembly also said that Lasso has been summoned on at least 2 occasions to appear in the Assembly, but has not attended or sent delegates to speak on his behalf on the charges for which he is under investigation. Now we move on to other topics. Wildfires in Chile decreased by 19%, but the government warns the eventual return of high temperatures. Chile's Undersecretary of the Interior, Manuel Monsalve, said that the weather window, which has brought a decrease in temperatures and even rainfall in part of the southern part of the country, has helped reduce the number of fire outbreaks from 98 on Saturday to 79 on Sunday, for a 19.3% decrease. However, the government official urged not to drop guards since temperatures will rise again, as from Monday, reaching again more than 30 degrees Celsius on Wednesday or Thursday this week. So far, the blazes have damaged over 420,000 hectares of forest, destroyed more than 1,400 houses, and affected almost 6,000 people, 350 of which have been sheltered.
Actualmente los incendios están afectando a las zonas de vegetación.
New Zealand's Prime Minister warned residents on Sunday to hunker down and prepare an evacuation plan as Cyclone Gabrielle began pummeling the northern tip of the country. Cyclone Gabrielle is forecast to envelop the upper half of the North Island over a 48-hour period from Sunday evening, 2 weeks after parts of the same region experienced devastating flooding. Auckland remains under a state of emergency after flash floods swamped the city on January 27th, resulting in 4 deaths and forcing thousands from their homes. Debris from that deluge remains on the streets of the country's biggest city, which now faces another bout of heavy rainfall and severe winds. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said everyone should be ready to face the threats posed by the flooding, huge ocean swells, and strong winds. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Turkey and Syria, the human losses are estimated at 36,000 after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that affected the two countries. The United Nations organization also indicates that the final death toll could reach 50,000. According to the latest figures, the death toll in Turkey reached 29,605, while the number of injured exceeded 80,000. The Syrian Ministry of Health, on the other hand, reports a total of 1,387 dead and 2,326 injured. In total, the death toll between the two countries is above 36,000 people. The United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, expressed his concern that the number of dead might exceed 50,000 as the search for the missing continues. The United Nations regret on Sunday the delays in the arrival of humanitarian aid to northwest Syria following the devastating earthquake that hit the country a week ago. The international organization called for more support for the millions of people who lost their homes and admitted that it has failed them. Aid has been trickling into Syria, whose health system and infrastructure have already been battered by more than a decade of war. The sanctions applied by the United States to Damascus hindered the arrival of humanitarian aid to the Arab nation, including a rescue team with a shipment sent by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. United Nations representatives met on Saturday with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who expressed his willingness to open new access points for humanitarian aid. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reports that an estimated 5.3 million people have been displaced by Syria or in Syria after last week's earthquake. Syria was hit by a 5.4 earthquake on February the 6th, which caused the collapse of multiple buildings in the north part of the country. The international organization said there were already around 6.8 million people displaced by the conflict in the Arab nation before the earthquake. The Secretary of the United Nations Organization for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, commented that Syria has not received even half of the support it should have. We move on to other topics. Israeli warplanes bombarded several cities in the Gaza Strip early Monday morning. In addition, the Israeli artillery fired three shells west of the town of Beit Hanun, north of the Strip. However, so far no casualties have been reported. The Israeli army claimed that the airstrikes targeted a subway rocket manufacturing complex run by Hamas, the militant group that rules Gaza. This exchange of fire comes amid a major escalation of violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has left more than 50 dead so far this year alone, the vast majority of them Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. And mourners gather around the body of Amir al-Bustami, 21 years old, inside the morgue of Nablus Hospital after he was killed in a pre-dawn Israeli army raid in Nablus, north and West Bank. A large Israeli unit stormed the city, surrounded a civilian building on Sufyan Street amid heavy gunfire, reports Palestinian news agency Wafa. Ahmad Jibril, head of the Emergency and Ambulance Department of the Palestinian Red Crescent, said 5 were wounded with live bullets and 1 with a rabbit-coated steel bullet. With the killing of al-Bustami, the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since the beginning of 2023 rose to 48, including 10 children, a 61-year-old woman, and a prisoner inside Israeli jails. Thousands of Israelis protested on Monday against the government's plan that could weaken the nation's judiciary. The demonstrators gathered in front of the nation's parliament with Israeli flags and signs with messages such as "There is no democracy without equality" and "Destroying the country to avoid trial," in clear reference to the perception that Prime Minister Netanyahu's desire to halt his corruption trials might be behind his government's planned judicial reforms. Palestinian and LGBTQI+ rainbow flags were also seen among the crowd. Despite the protests and a plea from President Isaac Herzog on Sunday not to start the legislative process, the government proceeded as planned with the introduction of the bill in Parliament on Monday. The Arab League and the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation (OIC) condemned in Egypt the Israeli government's decision to regularize new settlements in the occupied territories of West Bank. The 22-member league said in a statement that the new measures reflect the extreme character of Benjamin Netanyahu's government, which threatens to inflame the situation in the occupied territories and the regional stability. On the other hand, the 57-member, the OIC, denounced that Israel's settlement policy violates international resolutions and undermines the two-state solution to the Middle East conflict. Israel announced Sunday the regularization of 9 new settlements in the occupied West Bank without a state permit and said it will approve in the coming days the construction of new housing in the existing colonies. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Russia, the intelligence service reported that the United States is actively recruiting insurgents linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda to attack Russian territory. According to official reports from the agency, the U.S. military mainly selects fighters from the Caucasus and Central Asia region and then carried out recruitment from the Al-Tanf military base in Syria. According to the Community of Independent States, Washington's troops have already added to the ranks at least 60 terrorists already active in the Middle East who are learning to make and use improvised explosive devices. Likewise, the Kremlin assured that with these actions, the United States is demonstrating that it has lost any moral principle in its obsession to bleed Russia dry. The European Union prepares a new package of sanctions and economic restrictions against Russia. The European Bureau said it plans additional trade bans on imports into the EU of rubber, asphalt, vehicle exports, construction machinery, and more than the 10th sanctions package to be discussed on February 15th. The bans will also extend to the export of electronic components that Russia could use to make weapons. As far as diamonds are concerned, it is not clear at this stage whether they will be included in the package. The European Union will also add 130 names to the list of Russian entities, military and officials installed in Ukraine. According to the same source, 4 Russian banks, among them Alfa Bank, are exposed to new financial sanctions. In Germany, the National Armed Forces began training Ukrainian soldiers on Monday to operate the Leopard 2 tanks. The training will take place mainly at the Armored Troops School in Münster, Lower Saxony, according to the German Defense Ministry. The authorities intend to complete these trainings in an accelerated manner in order to synchronize them with the delivery of the tanks themselves. 14 units of the Leopard 2A6 model is the number promised to Kiev by the German government, to which more German-made tanks could be added, which other European countries plan to supply. And Cyprus' former foreign minister, Nikos Christodoulides, has been elected president of the Republic on Sunday, becoming at 49 the youngest leader of the divided Mediterranean island nation. The conservative Christodoulides won the second round of the presidential elections with 51.91% of the votes. Runoff rival independent candidate Andreas Mavroyiannis, who was supported by the main opposing political force, the Progressive Party of the Working People, obtained 48.09%. The president of Cyprus represents this Greek Cypriot community, which only controls 2/3 of the island, while the rest is run by the Turkish Cypriot side. The newly elected Christodoulides has spoken out strongly about the dispute that keeps the island divided. The island has been divided since a 1974 Turkish intervention triggered by a coup instigated by Greece's then ruling military junta. In Croatia, at least oral medical unions have called for a protest at the seat of government on Saturday, February 18th, in view of what they consider to be an unsustainable situation in the public health care system, both for professionals and for patients. Nataša Bantoskić, president of the Association of Family Doctors, explained at a press conference that the depressing situation of the public health care has been going on for years, but there have been no improvements and even less solutions. Mismanagement has caused a catastrophic lack of doctors in the system, and therefore the 5 unions calling the protest decided to act to protect the survival of Croatian public health care, the interests of patients, and the rights of doctors. And the Catholic clergy in Portugal have sexually abused at least 4,815 minors since 1950, according to results of a year-long independent inquiry announced on Monday, following accounts from hundreds of victims. Pedro Stretch, the head of the commission, said the figure represents the absolute minimum number of victims of sexual abuse. As the inquiry revealed, most perpetrators, 77% of them, were priests, and most of the victims were boys aged 10 to 14, and they were abused in Catholic schools, churches, priests' homes, confessionals, among other locations. The Portuguese Catholic Church was rocked last year by cases of alleged cover-up of sexual abuse, including by bishops who remain active in church roles. The commission said it was preparing a list of accused priests still working. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.